Does the NFL have a quarterback development problem? We're going to discuss that and a whole lot more this time on Football Frenzy. Welcome to the Frenzy, everybody. It's been a couple of weeks. It's the Iceman and Coach, that is the coach, Brad Powell, and so much has happened in the landscape of football, both college and the NFL, and we're going to get to it in good time. Coach, how you doing, buddy?
Iceman, doing well. And I know it's been a long couple weeks, man, for both of us for multiple reasons, but happy to be back here doing Football Frenzy. We're just kind of like our happy place. I feel like this has become a little bit of an escape for us away from the day-to-day grind and everything else that encompasses normal life. And here we are, happy to be here.
Here we are indeed. So it is October 29th. In 2 days, our kids get to have so much fun doing that lovely thing that kids like to do, trick-or-treating, getting tons of candy, and we get to get fat off of the candy that they're not allowed to have, which is mostly
Dad
like
tax.
That's right. Oh, I've been doing that hard lately because James is going to be 5 years old, and he's got to learn the basics of the dad tax. It just is. But you're right, though. This is an escape, and it has been a long couple of weeks. I know for me on the personal front, we were going to record last week. I ended up having to go out of town and help my dad out. My aging parents, it's tough when you live far away from your parents when they're getting older. And it's something that we all probably are going to go through in some form or fashion. You're living it now. Your dad is living with you, but he's able to take care of himself, do all the basic things in life. And eventually everybody gets to a point where hopefully they have somebody who can take care of them. So this is a nice escape. And we certainly have a lot to cover today, man, because college, we're on the precipice of the very first college football playoff rankings. And it feels like we've played so much football, and yet we still, I don't know, do you disagree? We don't really know who the front runner is.
We don't, but I think that's a byproduct of the 12-team playoff, because if we were still in the 4-team playoff era, you could probably narrow this down to maybe a dozen teams by this point in time that had a realistic chance of making the playoff. But instead, I mean, we're probably looking at a pool of 30 teams that still have, I mean, maybe a long shot, but still have a path to the playoff. And I think that's what makes it so exciting.
And you're talking about just getting to the playoff. You're not talking about making it even smaller of a subset of teams that realistically have a chance of winning the national title. Or do you believe that all 12 teams that make the playoff have a legitimate chance?
Well, that'd be like saying that all 68 teams that punch a ticket to the NCAA tournament in basketball, March Madness, have a chance. We all know that's not the case, right? I mean, it's just been here in the last, 10 years that we've seen a 16 seed win, an opening round game over number one. So, those teams are a long ways away from competing for a national title. But for a lot of these schools, it's going to mean a lot to them to earn a berth to the playoff. I mean, and I think, and this is a subject for another day, for another podcast, perhaps, but I think that in these college towns across America, depending on the size and the culture, a winning program, be it football or even basketball, could save a city, could rejuvenate a city. And I think that we as a society sometimes maybe underestimate the power that a nationally relevant sports program can have on a community.
I guess you're not wrong. I said you were talking about Fansville and getting on the old hype train, which are two great commercials this year. But I think when I think about the two sports, and I'm not sure that the 68-team field of the NCAA tournament is really a good comp for the 12-team playoff, because I think you could say that over the course or over the 12 teams, vastly superior talent to what you'd see across the board in the NCAA tournament when you have teams from these very low-level conferences that make it because of an automatic bid, whereas the automatic bids in this particular scenario are at least they are in the Power 5 or the Power 4, whatever you want to call it, right? So like you're getting good teams that are automatically in here. You're not, I don't want to say giving away pity invites or charity invites for the most part. You have to earn your way in. And so I would say that it's probably more likely that the 12th team has a chance to win the national championship than the 68th team would have to win the NCAA tournament. Is that fair?
On the surface, yes, I would say it's fair, but I would also say that football is a game where the talent on the field, I think, matters maybe a little more than in basketball because in basketball, you could have one guy have a great game and it could change the outcome of the game. One guy goes off and shoots, 47% from three, and it could change the outcome of the game regardless. But I do think in football, with the physicality that exists, that there is more of a disparity between the number one team and the number 12 team. That gap is probably not too dissimilar from the number one to the number 68. Now, the number one to number 68, huge gap, but 1 to 12 on a scale, probably not that much of a difference in my opinion. I just think that it's harder to win a football game if you are at a talent deficit than it is basketball.
Yeah, so probably what you're thinking is the 4 line in the NCAA tournament and up is probably more equivalent to the 12-team playoff here. Like if you expanded the football playoff and you'd have teams that were way down in the bowels, like Louisiana or something like that, and that's possible that they could make it. But I think that Louisiana and BYU, if BYU were to get like the 11 seed, there's a huge talent disparity there. But I think that it has added a bunch of intrigue. It certainly has made it, or at least perceived, that there's going to be less unbeatens, and we are going to get to that. We're going to do an unbeaten watch, and we're going to kind of look at that throughout the rest of the season, because I think it was your dad who predicted that there may not be an unbeaten team. And every conference has some intrigue right now, which is really what you want. And I think that you and I predicted that this would be one of the best seasons we've ever seen. And I think so far we've gotten a lot of good games and that the season has delivered. And what's best, there's still a lot of football to play.
Yeah, there's tons of football left to play. There's so many crazy things that can happen. And I think that, a lot of right now things are really cloudy because some of these teams that are in that top 4 to 6, 8 range are going to play each other. So some of this is going to hash itself out, but also at the same time, depending on the outcomes, it could just make things even more complicated, which is wonderful. And here on the show, we always root for chaos because it just makes things more interesting, especially from a content creation standpoint, right? It gives us more stuff to talk about. But the possibilities that exist in this 12-team playoff are fascinating to me.
They're fascinating, especially when you start looking at the conferences. And let's start with the ACC, which is a conference I would say you and I had as intriguing to start the season mid a couple of weeks ago. And now we're sitting here. And I think there are more teams that are in the hunt in the ACC, not just for the playoff, but I think for the ACC in general, that is sort of surprising. And the ACC is wide open. I would say it's completely wide open with 4 undefeated teams in conference. And obviously, you have a couple of undefeated teams nationally that are in the rankings as well. You have Clemson, who you and I on this show said that Clemson probably wasn't what they were when they got absolutely trounced by Georgia. And they've beaten who they've played. They've looked impressive in doing so for the most part. They're rising. You obviously have the Heisman frontrunner or the perceived Heisman frontrunner, Cam Ward in Miami. The Hurricanes look pretty good. Virginia Tech, even. I said they were dead because they just looked lifeless, and they're doing the same thing that they did last year. They're just doing it a little bit early. They're starting to look good. They're starting to put some things together. Let's not forget Pitt. There's a lot of things that could happen in the ACC that could spoil a potential playoff berth. And I think that that's very exciting, even though I will admit I don't think an ACC team really has a legitimate chance to beat the real big boys in college football.
I would agree. I feel like the top of the ACC has not been tested nationally, right? I feel like we've seen some of these other leagues, whether it be by expansion or by non-conference scheduling, that we've seen them branch out and play the other strong teams in the country. We haven't seen a lot of that in the ACC. Part of that is because the conference as a whole isn't incredibly strong, even though now they are coast to coast. But let's not get caught up on Cal and Stanford. And I think that while Clemson, I think, is flying under the radar and could be sort of a dark horse, like playoff team that could, mix things up a little bit. I don't think they've been challenged nationally outside of being
Georgia.
basically embarrassed by Georgia, right? We haven't seen them go out there and win a signature, have a signature win, if you will.
That's
And
fair.
And Miami has been taken to the wire
Should have lost to Virginia Tech.
time after time after time. And one of these days, the luck is going to run out for the Hurricanes. And
Maybe.
I'm not, I mean, sure, they always say great teams find a way, right? But I also think that, like, they also say again, great teams get lucky. But I just don't see how this is sustainable. And I know that you can't quantify things like luck, but I just can't see how Miami is going to keep getting the breaks that they've been getting over the course of the season. And so I think that things could get really interesting. Like the ACC could turn into a conference that perhaps steals a bid, or they could possibly be a 2-ish bid conference depending on how things shake out. But they could also very easily be a 1-bid conference.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to be wild coming to the finish in the ACC.
Well, let's say Miami runs the table, goes all the way to the ACC championship game, and loses to, let's say, Virginia Tech. Probably not going to happen. A one-loss Miami team gets into the playoff. I mean, especially if they have the Heisman winner in their midst. Like, they make the playoff. Obviously, now you have a conference champion with 3 losses that makes the playoff, which, in my opinion, is good. But I know a lot of people think it could water down the product. But like we talked about with the NCAA tournament, good teams lose all the time. And so what happens, though, if you get a 1-loss Clemson team and an undefeated Miami team? Clemson wins. Obviously, Miami still gets in. Does a 2-loss Clemson team end up getting in? Do they have enough? This is what I think will be fascinating with But with teams like this, I think over the years, what we're going to start to see is almost like a selection show where we start talking about resume, because that's something that the NCAA tournament has done a very good job of being transparent about. Here's the resume. We may not agree with the decisions. At least they're giving us the reasons. They're giving us the criteria. We get to look at what happened throughout the course of the season. And I think we're going to start to see that. And I think this is the first year, obviously, it's happening. But there are so many scenarios in which this could happen. And yeah, it could be a 2-bid conference. But some of these others, I mean, we'll skip ahead and talk about the Big 12. In my opinion, the Big 12 could end up being one of those bid-stealing conferences, because you have a lot of teams right now, I'd say a lot, like 4 teams that have a legitimate chance to win it. And they're going to take a bit away from, let's say, the BYUs of the world, the Iowa States of the world, right? Those are undefeated teams. Iowa State, Budge is very high on them. Budge thinks that they could be a real contender. And then you got Colorado, and they're putting it together. They're starting to put together wins. They're bowl bound. I would say that this is a successful season for them. And we're forgetting Kansas State, a 1-loss team who has beaten a lot of good football teams this year and done so in a way that has gone kind of under the radar. There's another 2-bid, potentially more than that, right? If, again, BYU, I mean, does a 1-loss BYU team get in? Does a 1-loss Iowa State team get in? These are questions that have to be answered based off of resume. I would say that probably Iowa State may get the nod over a Clemson if they're 1-loss, unless they win, of course, the entire ACC. But that's what I'm thinking. And that's where this is going to get so fascinating over the next couple of weeks, because that first playoff ranking means nothing.
Well, what's interesting is how long have we had the field of 64 or 68 exist in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and we still don't always know what's going to happen. I think that for the most part now, the experts are able to hone in on, at least a good like 8 teams that are maybe on the bubble that could go one way or the other, which is nice. But we're talking about, this is my favorite thing about all the predictions you're seeing, is none of us know. None of us have any idea how the college football playoff committee are going to weigh these resumes. Is there going to be recency bias? Like in Notre Dame's case, are they going to be willing to forgive a loss to Northern Illinois, who really has just been average since? It's not like they've just gone and they're not undefeated, right?
No.
I mean, they've been average since beating Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame has done what they've needed to do since then, and they're going to need to continue to do so. But what weighs more at this point? Because there's not a lot of needle moving games left on Notre Dame's schedule, unless Army remains undefeated, and like your signature win cannot be over I would say, at least in the public eye, like your signature win can't be over an undefeated Army team, right? Not in 2024. It's just not a thing, right? So it's like, okay, what matters more? A win over Texas A&M in week 1 or a loss to Northern Illinois in week 2? Now, I think all that aside, an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets in, but is that fair? How much of that is just because it's Notre Dame? And I'm not naive enough to say that doesn't matter, because I think it does.
It does matter.
You know what I mean? Like, because there's going to be an 11-1 team from the Big 12 or the ACC that probably doesn't make it.
That's
You
what I
know?
was going to ask you. Like, is there some kind of, in your mind, if you're on the committee, are you ranking these conferences in terms of, like, let's say degree of difficulty? Like, do you think the ACC or the Big 12 carries more weight with the wins in conference right now?
Oh man.
See, this is why it's going to
Without
be tough for the
yeah,
committee, man, because like this is going to change on a week to week basis.
it is. I mean, and without really doing a deep dive into like, and this would be a Budge question because he would know, like he
Yes.
would have such a thorough analysis.
Hmm.
On the surface, I would say that I think the Big 12 is a little more. I think there's less trash, if you will. There's less bottom feeders in the Big 12, I feel like, than in the ACC.
Probably right.
Now the ACC though also like Utah hasn't been what they should have been or could have been. You know, there've been a couple disappointments there, but I feel like the average of the ACC is slightly higher than the ACC or of the Big 12 is slightly higher than the ACC. Now, we're saying this though, and we're not talking about it. We talked about Miami and Clemson and
Yep.
Pitt. Okay, SMU is undefeated in
Yes,
the ACC.
they are.
Virginia Tech has one loss. Duke only has one. I mean, so like there's I say that and I can go back there and make an argument for the ACC right after it. So, I guess that just makes your point.
I mean, and there's still teams in the ACC that are giving a fight to these top tier programs in the ACC. I mean, Louisville took it to Miami and just couldn't put it together. Now, that wasn't a game where Miami got lucky. They did get lucky against Virginia Tech, and I'm going to be banging that drum all year long because I've watched that play so many times, and I feel like that was a catch, but it is what it is. So that kind of was the jump start for Virginia Tech, but these teams are dangerous now. And that's, I think, what is bad for a team like Miami, a team like Clemson, because I don't know if Clemson can afford another loss in conference unless it's in the title game and still get in. Because as you said, they lost to Georgia. At this point, right now, given what Georgia has recently done, that looks like a good loss. And yes, it was a blowout, but it's in week one.
Right.
And I think Notre Dame gets a pass because their loss was in week two. And the win against Texas A&M has aged well. But to Budge's point a couple weeks ago, like a month ago now, he said that voters very rarely will age wins either in the positive or negative direction. And I think that's the nuance of all of this that needs to be figured out is these wins need to age. I complained about that with the NCAA tournament where I say like big wins in December, they say that they count the same, but there's a lot of recency bias because we say, oh, look at this run they did through the ACC tournament. Okay, well, they looked like ass for 6 weeks. So that doesn't count for anything?
Well, I'll say this as a Notre Dame fan, okay? I think especially if A&M goes on to run the table, beat Texas, and that gets them a seat at the table in the SEC championship game at that point. If that occurs, I think I can objectively look back and say that okay, like Texas A&M has improved tremendously since then, and it would be much easier to convince myself of the fact that Notre Dame caught Texas A&M before they figured shit out than it was that Notre Dame is better than Texas A&M. I mean, I think that would be an easy conclusion to come to. You know what I mean? And I think that will likely be the national impression is that well, it's not that Notre Dame was better than Texas A&M at the beginning of September. It's just that Notre Dame had, you have a coach that's been there for a few years, a little bit of an established culture. You're playing a first-year head coach in his first game. Like, they were ripe for the picking, so on and so forth. Yeah, Notre Dame did what they had to do, but like they caught him before they put the pieces together. And especially, I think one thing that benefits Texas A&M, the opposite of what happened to Florida State last year, they made that quarterback change and they became a different team. And so that's what you're going to see is you're going to see people say, this is a different team than who played Notre Dame in September.
Which
and they're
goes
not
with
wrong.
The Florida State argument.
They're not wrong if they say that. I watched that team play on Saturday night against LSU in the second half. That was a different football team. Now, I will say this. LSU probably wasn't prepared schematically to face that quarterback and that
Sure.
style of offense. And so we'll see how that ages as we move forward here when teams are prepared to face like kind of the option offense. But it was a different football team. Like just the energy, everything around it. I mean, they all of a sudden, the quarterback doesn't play defense, and they played better in all phases of the game when that guy came in. So we'll see where it goes from here. But I could see how you could make the argument that it wasn't a Notre Dame's better than A&M. It was more so an A&M has improved significantly since then. And like my dad said, yes, Notre Dame's improved, but unfortunately for them, the schedule hasn't aged well. Florida State's trash.
Oh,
USC
so
is
bad.
reeling. I mean, the couple marquee games that should have been left on the schedule. I mean, the best game you have left is Army, and that
Yep.
sucks for Notre Dame. But all that being said, 11-1 Notre Dame is in.
Yes, they are. And the factor I think that we've not talked about yet is there is going to be a factor of fans that travel, ratings. I think that is going to matter because I think for football specifically, there's so much money involved. The NCAA tournament makes money hand over fist because the format is what gets people coming to the table. They want the upsets. So it makes more sense to have some of these potential Cinderellas in there. I don't think that really works for football. I think that casual fans don't have the bracketing the way that they do for the NCAA tournament. So they're not just going to turn it on because they have a bracket. They're not going to turn on the game unless they have a name, whether it's a name to like or a name to hate. And Notre Dame does that in both ways, right? They're polarizing. And that's where the last two conferences, you're talking about the SEC and Big Ten, you had to take offline that the SEC, the top of it, may not actually be that good. They're just all beating up on each other. So I'd like you to expound on that a little bit.
It's going to be tough to really like say if that's accurate or not until things kind of play out here down the stretch and in the playoff. But I do suspect that there's not. You could argue, okay, Texas, Georgia maybe are the cream of the crop in the SEC, but we've seen these teams struggle with lesser teams in the league, or at least perceived lesser teams in the league. Look what Vanderbilt's done, and that's not a discredit to Vanderbilt. They've definitely got some pieces and they've done a good job, but I think it could be more true than in the past that it's not that the top of the SEC is so strong. It's more so that they're more even. Instead of being at an A plus level, they're at an A minus level. You got about 3 to 4 teams that played an A minus, the B plus level. Now, what's good for them is I think that everyone else in the country is about in the same boat. That's up there at the top. I think you could make the same argument for Ohio State. I Oregon hasn't shown me a lot to be concerned about to this point,
No.
but we got a little ways to go, so I'll reserve judgment. But so far, they've done what they've needed to do, especially coming into the Big Ten and having to play some of these, big boys, comparatively speaking to what the Pac-12 was. These road trips, they go to the Big House this week, and granted, Michigan's not what they were last year, but that's still a tough place to go play. And we'll see how they handle it. And to be able to play at that level week after week, like that's the difference. Like anybody can show up one week and put it together. To be able to do consistently, and so far they've been able to do that. We'll see if they can continue. But the SEC. I mean, Ole Miss can beat anybody on any day. LSU can beat anybody on any day. A&M can beat. I mean, there's probably 5 to 6 teams you could say like can beat anybody else on any day in the SEC. And I don't think it's hard to say it. Do you think those teams are all that good? No, I just think that they're all that not great. Yeah, not that they're bad, but there's no one's elite.
Well, if you took an LSU, if you took an Ole Miss and put them in another conference, ACC, Big 12, they're probably running the table because I think they are more talented than some of those teams, but
In
they're
those
not.
conferences, yes. I mean, because when we talked about that when we talked about ACC, Big 12, one thing I wanted to say is despite the couple teams that are at the top, I don't think there's a legit national title contender in either league.
I don't either. I think there's some potential bid stealers, but not national title
Right.
contenders for sure. But the SEC and Big Ten, I think there are. The Big Ten to me is the most intriguing conference right now because, as you said, Oregon, Ohio State, I think it was Dave from Political Football texted and said Oregon and Ohio State are going to crush Michigan this year. And I think they are both very good football teams. But one thing I loved about that Oregon Ohio State game, and that was a while ago, that was before all this stuff happened with me, is Ryan Day got outcoached at the end of the game in a move that they have now banned with the whole 12 men on the field thing. And look, do you remember when Mike Vrabel beat or bested Bill Belichick by playing against those rules and things like that, like leaning up against the line? It's called gamesmanship. And you've got to take and find whatever advantage you can find. But I love that it was against Ryan Day because we've talked about where he's at. And I just thought it was terrific. But Oregon struggled early, or at least perceived struggled early. Remember, they had a little trouble with Wyoming. I said they were going to have a close game with Boise, but obviously Boise is a good football team, so that doesn't look as bad now. They've just been cruising, but they can lose at any time. And as you said, they've got to play some tough teams in some tough environments. You got Penn State there. James Franklin teams, though, never really can get it done in the most crucial of moments. Maybe they are different this year. And how about Indiana, man? I mean, I got to say, when I turned on game day this weekend and saw that they were in Bloomington, Indiana, not for basketball, I was shocked, but also that is a great byproduct of where we are right now in college football.
It is, and I want you to mentally, everybody listening, to kind of like, get out your Venn diagram and let's overlap these two coaches, Ryan Day and Kirk Cignetti, right? Like, I want you to think about these guys and their demeanor and their confidence and the way their teams play on the field. And I think that there's such a contrast in how these guys approach the game. I feel like when you hear Ryan Day talk, he sounds like his butthole's puckered up, as tight as it could be. He's just so damn scared to lose and so damn scared to like have to take blame. And you have Kirk Cignetti that's, I win, Google me guy, right? I
Yep.
mean, he's just like arms wide open. And I mean, let's be honest though. Like, what do you have to lose by taking that approach in Indiana?
Nothing.
I mean, and that's his thing is he came in there and he's, when he's, they interviewed him on game day for anyone who watched it. And he's talking about, when he goes to the basketball game and is like, Purdue sucks. And so does Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, he's like, these people, what he's saying in the nicest way possible is these people are a bunch of losers that are accustomed to losing, so what do you have to do? What do you have to lose by convincing them that like we might win some? I mean, if you don't, it's just status quo. So there is a different environment and a different expectation, but like my goodness, man, like Kirk Cignetti just seems like he has ice in his veins. Like that dude seems like he cannot be shook in any way, and I hope he stays in Indiana forever because like that would
He
be
won't.
well, and that's what cracks me up. Me and my dad have this debate, right, about whether it's Brian Wardle at Bradley or any coach anywhere else about how he's always like, well, they say that they love it there, man. Their family loves it there. I'm like, what coach have you heard not say that? And they may not. I'm not saying they're lying to you, but if let's say the Oklahoma moves off Brent Venables and comes along and says, hey, Kurt, here's millions of dollars to come be our coach. I don't think it's going to matter how much his wife loves living in Bloomington, Indiana at that point. And
His wife will be saying "Boomer Sooner" in the bedroom. That's
yes,
what she'll be saying.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like no doubt about it. And that's just the reality. And these guys, I'm not. And again, it's not. I'm not even implying they don't mean it when they say it. I'm sure they do. But there is a breaking point. There's a tipping point, and money talks, bullshit walks, whatever. And if a big offer comes along, which I won't be surprised if it does, he's going to go. And I wish he would. It would be so good, so great for college football if he stayed and turned Indiana into a dynasty.
It's money talks. That's all that it really is. And I think if you take it to, I mean, right now, if I were to tell my employer I love where I work, and then somebody offered me double what I'm making now, I'd be like, I love where they work. So it's all relative to, I think, the fan bases, and like I said as well, these fan bases are so passionate about their school. They're so passionate about the towns, right, or the cities or whatever, and they feel a certain way, and they want to believe that a coach or a player, let's take the pros, for example, whenever a guy or gal leaves in free agency, people feel butthurt. They feel a certain way about it. And it is what it is now. It's so much of a business, but let's keep moving on and talking about some of these teams in here. But you also have the group of five. So you mentioned already Army, Navy. Unfortunately, Navy got absolutely shellacked by Notre Dame this weekend, which was very unpatriotic of the Irish, honestly. But it was good for Notre Dame because I think Navy is still a good football team. It's just Notre Dame plays a different style of football. But what I want so desperately is for Army and Navy to meet in their conference tournament, their conference championship game. And I would love if it were Army and Army weren't defeated and then gets to play Army, I mean, gets to play Navy again the next week. I mean, Army Navy twice in a row. I'm not sure I could handle it.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Do you think it diminishes though, the like the actual Army Navy game, the one that everyone's
So think of
looking
it this
forward
way,
to,
right? Think of it as they play for their conference, which is ridiculous, right? Two service academies playing for their conference.
and the American Conference? How about
Right.
that?
So that's amazing. But imagine if Navy ends up beating Army, and now a week later, they get to play again. The revenge factor. Like, usually it's sort of, you obviously, Army wants to beat Navy, Navy wants to beat Army. But now there's an added layer to it because they just played the week before. And what happens if it's some controversial call, something like that? Because this game is always about, oh, it's not about the names on the back of the jerseys, but now there were stakes to the Army Navy game, which there never is. And so I could imagine a scenario in which the next game could be like super physical. You know what I'm talking about? Like, and it's on an island. It's the only game that we
Right.
get to see that weekend. I don't think it should happen every year, but this particular year they're trending that way. That's why I want to see it. But I do think Army Navy should stay where it is historically.
So let's say that hypothetically, Army, which they got a hill to climb because of Boise, but let's say Army beats Notre Dame. They run the table. They beat Navy in the American Conference Championship game. And they have because the playoff will be announced before they play, I
Correct.
believe, right?
Correct.
Let's say they make the playoff. Like, why? I mean, like that's the most like crazy conflict ever.
Yes.
Like, because it's the most. There's a lot of people, very reputable people, that value the Army Navy game as the most prestigious rivalry in college football. And I think that the people that participate in these universities agree.
Yes.
But you're in the college football playoff. Like, how do you handle that? Like,
Listen.
it's a
Listen.
very. I think Army just plays it as it is. They did. I think they play it full bore
You got it.
and just take it as it comes.
You got it because coaches have been fired at those service academies for losing to Army or Navy, whatever it is, right? Army for
You
how
just
many
beat them.
years? Well, yeah, I know, but I'm saying like for how many years did Army continue to lose to Navy? And like that's a stain. It doesn't matter if they're 1-3 or 1-10 or something like that. It doesn't matter. That game matters. We talked about Ohio State. Ryan Day needs to win a national championship if he loses to Michigan this year. That's how much that singular game matters on the schedule. And I think that it does matter to Army and Navy. It does matter to Air Force too. Just Air Force doesn't get lumped in because they were created after Army Navy. So we don't get to see that game in prime time because it's not an old standing rivalry. But you and I both know how many times has Air Force won the Commander in Chief's trophy and nobody ever talked about it, right?
Right.
So I think
They
it
were in
does
the hunt
matter.
for the pick of the week this week. I'll say that.
They should not be.
To cover the spread, not
Okay.
to win.
All right. Well, we're going to
I
get to
was
that
like,
in a minute. But before we get to the games this week, you mentioned Boise. So Boise, I would say, is carrying the flag for the group of five. I do have a question for you, though. Is it because, I mean, they're obviously good and they're winning football games, but would you say it's fair that they're probably doing so, or at least in the driver's seat because they have potentially the Heisman winner in Ashton Genty?
Boise State is the Gonzaga of college football, right? Like
Mm, yeah.
they're now they don't. Gonzaga's been to a national championship game, but basketball is a little different, as we talked about earlier. I think that they get like they are automatically like put at the top of the pile because that they've had sustained success over a long period of time and played at a high level. And so even if like they're not as great, it's like they at least start at the top of the heap and then get shoved down if they struggle. Um, I don't know. I haven't watched. I'll admittedly I haven't watched any Boise State football to this point. I know that Ashton Genty's really good. I've seen some stat lines. I've seen some highlights.
He had an off week this week. He only had like
But
138
yeah,
yards.
off week. I mean, there's a lot of people that would like do anything to have that as an off week.
Yep.
Have that as a good week, and so uh, I don't know. I don't think that they're getting I don't think that they're getting inflated because that simply because he's a Heisman contender. I think that if anything, he's getting more shine as a Heisman contender because the team's good.
That I think is fair. And that comes down to right now, I believe they have Cam Ward projected over him in the Heisman watch. The Heisman has kind of become a quarterback award over the years, much like the MVP in the NFL. But the game has evolved to where the quarterback does matter. I mean, how many programs have we talked about over the years doing this show that they'd be so much better off if they had an actual quarterback, an actual good quarterback? Notre Dame has been in that situation. And Sam Hartman was a fine quarterback. Riley Leonard, fine quarterback. But my point is they haven't had this like super game changer who has led them to the promised land the way that we talked about Alabama for years. And then all of a sudden he's got Jalen Hurts and Tua and Bryce Young, and these guys are so much different than any quarterback that he had ever had. And so Cam Ward, who is on what is it in his third team now? Because I know he played for Washington State. I don't know how many times he's transferred, but he's playing well, and he is the reason why they are winning. And he's doing so in spots that people are probably seeing Cam Ward play more than Ashton Genty.
I would say this though. I can't remember who it was, but I heard someone talk about the aura around the Heisman, and
Sure.
that like whoever wins the award, like that there's just an aura around them. And again, I wish I could recall it more accurately, but there were a few people that had really good numbers, but they said that they just don't have that Heisman aura around them. I think that Ashton Genty does. I feel like he has that aura.
I see what you're saying.
He is unique because like he's got the like Michael Myers like running back stance where he literally just stands there like he's waiting in line at the pharmacy before the ball snapped. Like it's so bizarre. Have you seen this?
Yes, it's also very Gen Z, I feel like.
It's so interesting because it's not anything like what we've seen from running backs in history. Just think of the evolution, right? We're going to start seeing it more, I'm certain. But the evolution from running backs in a 3-point stance to hands on their knees to hands on their thighs to hands on their hip. I mean, it's just evolved, And I mean, once upon a time that wide receivers got in a 3-point stance. And so that's changed incredibly, but I think that he just does have that sort of aura around him, and I think more so than Cam Ward. And I do think that there probably is a little bit of that just Boise State, like it feels similar to like Lamar Jackson. It's like he's not on the best team necessarily, but everybody knows he's the best player type of thing.
But you know what? Something we haven't talked about on this show very much is when we used to talk about it all the time when I was a kid was a Heisman moment. You know what I mean? And that is something that the Heisman winner, I think you and I talked about it with Bryce Young. It's like when they came back against them, it was at Auburn. I'm like, this could be his Heisman moment. And I don't know are we going to get that with one of these guys late in the season. It's harder for a running back to have a Heisman moment than it is for a quarterback. But if Ashton Genty is breaking records, I mean, running backs don't usually have those kind of stats, even in college, where the running back still gets more featured than they do in the NFL. And so if a running back isn't going to win it with his stats, I mean, up until this week, he was averaging like 11 yards a carry, then like when the hell is a running back going to win the Heisman again? Because just start making it a quarterback award.
Was it Derrick Henry? See the last one?
Probably. And I don't even think he had these kind of stats. I mean, Derrick Henry was a genetic freak. He still is a genetic freak.
Yeah.
And so it was just completely different. Not to mention he's playing on teams that were going to the national championship game. Yeah. So obviously that helps.
And the last non-quarterback was what, Devonta Smith?
Yes. For Alabama again.
Yeah, another Alabama.
Right.
And that's what's interesting this year is that there's not like a clear-cut elite team, and I think we're going to end up getting a Heisman Trophy winner that is not the best player on the best team type of thing. And which I think is unique to college football to get that sort of thing. Like a lot of times, I mean, because of what? The Heisman Trophy is the MVP of college football, right?
Basically.
And like typically in the pro leagues, the MVP is the best player on the best team is the way it kind of pans out. And and for that reason, I think I'd be okay with really either one of these guys winning it because truthfully, I don't think either one of them play on the best team.
Nope.
And so they're just going to be getting credit for their raw talent, which is, I think, in the spirit of what the Heisman Trophy represents.
That's fair. Before we move on to the NFL, we've got a couple things left. So we're talking about unbeaten. So we have 8 unbeatens left so far this season. Oregon, Penn State, Miami, Iowa State, BYU, Indiana, Pitt, and Army. I have a question for you. I did actually look this up. Do you know how many unbeatens there were this time last year?
Well, I do, but I'll let
Oh,
you tell us.
well, I found 7. Is that what you found?
Well, I found it because you put it in the notes.
Oh, that's a
So
good
I
point.
saw I saw I saw
That's a
it
good
there
point.
first and foremost.
Excellent. Yeah, I actually looked because you know how we talked about the fact that there might not be any undefeated teams left at the end of the season, yet there are more this year than there were last year heading into this week. So I thought that was fascinating. But let's look at some of the matchups. So we talked about Boise already. They host San Diego State. They're 23.5-point favorites. Honestly, I think they should win that game handily, but you just have to keep watch. Virginia Tech travels to Syracuse, 4-point favorite on the road. And I have to say, who is the quarterback for Syracuse? It's a guy. He was Kyle McCord.
Yes, from Ohio State last year.
Looked awful and has looked pretty awful. 11 interceptions this year. That's a lot for a quarterback through this many weeks.
He's
So
Drew Aller light.
yeah, not good. So hopefully Virginia Tech can shake off being on the road and get the big W. Biggest game of the weekend, Ohio State, Penn State.
It is a travesty. Hold on.
Go ahead.
It is a travesty that this game is being played at 11 a.m. or noon on the East Coast. An absolute travesty. This should be a 7 p.m. kickoff, whiteout environment. Like, I cannot understand how, even with all the money and the networks and the contracts, that you cannot pull a few levers to put this game in prime time. Absolutely crazy.
Who makes those decisions? Because like
it's been set though. Like it's because I remember they were talking about it in the summer.
And I'm like, the goddamn thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, because when you look to next week's schedule, if you like look it up, there's a dozen games to say TBA or TBD, whatever.
I didn't find out Virginia Tech's game time this weekend until like the Wednesday before the game. So you're telling me that they couldn't figure that out? This is obvious. Ohio State, Penn State. If you look at that in the preseason, probably both teams are going to be good, and both teams were projected to be very good this year. So why would you not make that the game to watch?
This is, you know what this is? This is an indictment on Big Noon Kickoff.
I agree.
I guarantee you, they're the Big Noon Kickoff game of the whatever. They're going to be in Happy Valley. It's going to be Big Noon Kickoff. Like this, how do you want this, man? Like how many times like game day doesn't tie themselves to like a game, right? Because yeah, they might be at a site, but like Kirk Herbstreit goes somewhere else, wherever, for whatever their game is. And I don't know why they handcuff themselves to doing whatever game they want to do their show at. If you really want to compete with College Game Day, like I don't know. It's a mess. I don't like it, and to hell with Fox for doing
it for many reasons. But here's the thing. So this game is fascinating because obviously both of these teams still very much alive in the playoff. But I think maybe Penn State could afford a loss in this more so than Ohio State. If you're talking big picture right now, because I think Penn State would still have a path of getting to the college football playoff vis-a-vis the Big Ten title game based off of many other factors. But we talked about a few weeks ago, Ryan Day losing to Oregon, and that happened. If he loses to Penn State, now all the pressure's on because the path gets a lot harder for them.
He loses to Indiana.
Oh, they're not even getting there, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, yeah, it's a tough path for Ohio State, and we're not going to go down that road again because we already talked about the fact that they've spent so many millions of dollars on coaches and players and all that. That's the fascinating part here. I would like to think that Ryan Day is going to be able to get it done in this environment. I think on the other side, James Franklin teams don't seem to have it when they really need it against teams like Ohio State. Very similar to Ryan Day against certain other teams. But I think James Franklin teams have been extremely solid, very well coached. But do they have enough to beat a team like Ohio State, who still has a lot of firepower? I mean, it's not like they got blown out by Oregon. That was a great game, and I think they're still a great football team.
I'm not the biggest James Franklin fan, like by any stretch of the imagination. But my goodness, like I would root against. I would root for almost anyone against Ryan Day at this point. It's just he's so easy to root against, in my opinion.
100%.
I mean, even like Ohio State faithful have gotten really critical of him, which is going to happen. It's just one of those programs. He just does not endear himself, in my opinion. like we've talked about different guys and their behavior, and he's one of those guys that like his shtick only works if you're winning. Like you know what I mean? Like you cannot
Yes.
be the way he is. You cannot have the personality that he has and struggle the way. And again, such a stretch to say that they're struggling, but like they are not living up to whatever the expectation is of Ohio State in the eyes of their fans and everything else. And especially considering the money that you mentioned that they've spent on their roster and coaches. And so, I mean, for that reason, I'm totally rooting against him. And we've seen him be out coached too many
So
times.
so many times.
Yeah, too many times, yeah. I mean, he was outcoached by Lou Holtz almost, and Lou Holtz hasn't coached for 30 years. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was just. I mean, I don't know. I just, it's so easy to root against him. I don't even care how good the team is at this point in time. I'm all about like we are Penn State. Let's go.
Think about this. Think about the fact that Ryan Day could lose to Oregon, could lose to Penn State, and possibly Indiana all in the same season, which is just crazy. And all of those are conference games, which is also crazy.
And
But
then those three teams would be undefeated, which is
yes,
wild because you can only put two of them in the conference championship.
I know. So there's so many things about this game that could almost be like a linchpin for the rest of the season. I'm with you. I'm rooting for Penn State, but Ohio State is a really good football team. So it's not like they're not going to just fall over and die because they're in Happy Valley at 11 a.m. or whatever the hell it is. We talked about the ACC earlier. Duke traveling to Miami. Miami's a 20.5 point favorite at home. So is this trend going to continue? Duke is a solid football team, if not unspectacular. If Miami is as spectacular as they have looked at times, then they should handle. Army and Air Force are possibly going to be your pick of the week. Air Force stinks, just absolutely stinks. Army is a 22.5 point favorite, but it's a service academy game, and you just throw records, everything out the window. Even though Air Force got absolutely bludgeoned by Navy, I'd like to think Army would follow suit in that regard, but never, never can take for granted one of these games.
No, it's not my pick of the week. It was a fringe pick of the week. This is one of the games
Fringe.
me and my dad talked about, and I
Yes.
mentioned it, and he's like, "Oh, Army's gonna kill him." I'm like, "Dude, it's just a rivalry game, freaking giant spread. Like this is one of those throw the records out type of things." And maybe Air Force is just that bad. It's possible, which is really what kept me away from it. It's not the pick of the week, but it was close to being.
22.5 points for Army is a lot. Like, that's a huge spread. They've won games very, very handily. So we'll see. The aforementioned Oregon Ducks traveling to the big house, 14.5 point favorites on the road. Michigan is not what we think that they are, or not what they were last year. I think you said something about like biggest tank job or something like that, but I wouldn't even go that far. I think it's just, this is what happens when you turn over from a national championship contender, you lose your coach and all that stuff. But Oregon's going to have to stay focused because the fans are going to be ready, but I think they're a superior football team to Michigan. Iowa State hosting Texas Tech. Again, 14.5 point favorites.
Dangerous.
I agree. This is a danger game right here because I think Texas Tech is a team that has the ability to upset a team like this. Iowa State feeling themselves, right? Pushing toward the end of the season. The grind really starts now. This is a trap game, in my opinion, but I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa State still pulls it out, just doesn't cover.
Yeah, I mean, Budge is high on both these teams and has
Yes.
been. And so I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Iowa State should win this game, but I think that Texas Tech is gonna keep it really close and maybe threaten to win, but where'd you say it was? I just X'd it out. Um
Well, it's
okay,
in
so it's
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 in
in
Iowa.
Ames. All right.
Yep.
So I mean, there's a little edge there, and because I do think home field advantage matters in college football, but this is gonna be a battle. I'm looking forward to watching this game if I can.
I totally agree. So we do have a question here. If Alabama loses a third game, will they find a way to get into the playoff? I
Afraid not.
would say no, because I think that they would have lost all conference games at this point. So it's going to be impossible for them to get into the conference championship game. It just depends on maybe how they lose, but I don't see that happening. But we really appreciate the question. I believe that's
I
Go
think if they
Balance.
were to, I think if they were to, that like literally you're talking about like four SEC teams making the playoff at that
Yeah, that's
point if it
tough.
came to that, and which I'm not saying is outside of the realm of possibility,
Yeah.
but people would lose their minds if that happens,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
you know what I mean, like nationally.
Yes.
The whole argument about SEC bias would just skyrocket.
Correct. So moving right along, Indiana traveling to Michigan State, 7.5-point favorite on the road. Again, road game. Indiana coming off the high of having College game day there and all that. Will they be focused? I could see this potentially being a close game, but I think Indiana is actually good. Clemson hosting Louisville, 10.5-point favorites at home is Clemson. Louisville has looked good at times, but I think they are decidedly mid in a very mid ACC. So Clemson's going to have to take care of business. And the biggest ACC game, Pitt at SMU this weekend, traditional ACC matchup, obviously. But you had a 7.5-point favorite. I believe SMU is a favorite at home. So Pitt undefeated, not getting the love, but we'll see what they're made of, man. So there's definitely a lot of games to look forward to on the slate this weekend. Any other additionals? Who is Notre Dame playing? I forget.
Notre Dame's on a bye week.
Okay, there you go.
Which would have been like ideal because they play Florida State next weekend. So it's like they
Perfect.
planned a bye week leading into Florida State, and Florida State sucks. So not saying that Notre Dame couldn't find a way to lose the game, but it kind of just didn't work out in their favor. But it never fails whenever we see SMU and how well they're doing. I'm like, I always think about how it's taken them
A long time.
30 years.
Yes.
30 years to resurrect their program from the death penalty. And because I grew up not having a clue who SMU was. I had no idea like that they even existed as a child. And as a casual sports fan as a child, and up until honestly, up until the freaking documentary, The Pony Excess, that was probably my first exposure to the fact that this is a school that had a once proud college football program.
Yes, they did. And now they're part of conference realignment. So good for them coming back. And what's funny is what happened back then really wouldn't be a problem today. So just very interesting to look back at college football and think about everything that we thought was the worst thing possible and was downing the integrity of the game. Now it's all in play. It's just all here. And Coach right now has a visitor who is whispering in his ear some facts. That is our intern.
That's our intern. Yeah, she's just a little curious. That's all.
That's okay. That is okay. We need the interns to be giving us information. Got to send them out. So let's move on to some NFL talk. We have about a half an hour, 35 minutes left. So we're going to start with your beloved Colts. And you have said that you have not been able to get into the NFL this year. So you decided to turn on, I think, hopefully Red Zone and watch the NFL. And this week was crazy. I would say parity on display. But the biggest story coming out is from Indianapolis, and it is Anthony Richardson. So Anthony Richardson is your star quarterback. He's had some injury problems, but when he's been in, he's looked pretty good. I think he's looked a little shaky recently. It was an incident over the weekend where he took himself out, or seemingly took himself out of one play, I believe, during the game. Went right back in, I believe, and it's gotten a lot of hype. And since then, Shane Steichen has decided to bench Anthony Richardson for, of all people, Joe Flacco, who I believe is now the Tanya Harding of the NFL, because every time he's a backup, somebody gets hurt, and he seems to be stealing a job. But I wanted to ask you about this because it's multifaceted. So let's first start with the whole tapping out thing.
I'm pretty positive that this was a big third down in a critical moment late in the game.
I think so.
When he tapped himself out. And it's unheard of. It's unheard. I mean, this, and I'm not saying he wasn't tired or whatever, but how many times have we seen that clip of Matthew Stafford when his freaking collarbone's broken or his shoulder's out or whatever, and he won't come out of the game? Or we've seen all these other quarterbacks banged up. I mean, Tua's brain is a sponge, and that guy's still running out there trying to play the game. And we have this guy who is, and to his credit, I guess he was honest, but literally goes to the press conference and just says, I was tired. Like, man, that ain't it. Like, it's almost unbelievable. You don't want just the message that sends to your teammates is not good. I mean, to hell with the fans. Like, I mean, whatever. The fans are going to think what they want. To hell with the fans. Like, the message that sends to your teammates. So, like, this is not a guy that we can count on in the tough moments to persevere at all. Like, I am fully 1,000,000% in support of Shane Steichen benching him. I have no problem with it whatsoever. And it just completely, I mean, and despite that, the guy was like 3 for 17 or something. I mean, he played one of the worst games you could play at the position of quarterback in the National Football League. And so you put those two things together, I think that the benching is warranted. It's not like he went out and played a great game and then tapped out and they benched him. I mean, he played terribly, and then they did so. I mean, I wasn't crazy about the draft pick anyways. It seemed like a little bit of a roll of the dice, like typical Jim Irsay, I guess. But and this is going to segue, I'm sure, into the next team we're going to talk about. I sat around honestly, like Sunday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, thinking about the NFL. Really, I was texting you. I was like, man, it sucks. Like, I'm just not that into the NFL. I don't feel an emotional attachment really to any team, even though, yeah, I was a Colts fan for a long time and really into it. Specifically the Peyton Manning years, but I was a fan. Like, Jim Harbaugh was their quarterback when I like started becoming a fan of the Colts. So like that's what I always say. Like, I wasn't like a bandwagon Peyton Manning Colts fan. But I'm like, man, I wonder if like I might consider kind of like transitioning my fandom
Oh,
to this Bears team.
the Bears, huh?
It's the local team.
Yes.
I might consider transitioning my fandom to this Bears team. Like I'm seeing some things that I like. I think they got some talent. I mean, despite like my opinion of Caleb Williams as a college quarterback, especially last year, I think that he has the talent and the tools to get them to where they need to go. I like the grittiness that surrounds the franchise. And then they did what they did.
Well,
And I don't know what to do at this point. I guess I'm just going to stick to the Lions.
Yes. Let me go back to the Richardson thing because I saw this sort of unfold in the media and was fascinated by it because, like, when you hear, oh, he tapped himself out for a play, it's like, well, what does that mean? And when you see that, yes, critical time of the game, you see how bad he was playing. The thing that I don't understand, and I'm not sure if we'll ever know, is he was very matter of fact of I was just tired. Well, he's 22 years old. So if he is that tired and needs to come out, then perhaps he has something else going on physically that maybe is holding him back.
We'll
He
try
needs
to
to look
work
at
tomorrow.
yeah, well, he needs he needs to look at conditioning and things like that. I don't know. I don't know any of that. And I haven't heard whispers of there being a problem organizationally with his work ethic or anything like that. Because usually you hear about that, right? Something like this follows some type of whispers or something. We haven't heard anything about that. It just seems a very black and white. I was tired. I took myself out and then put myself back in. It's very strange in that regard. And I feel like this benching is almost like when a player doesn't hustle out a ground ball in baseball and he gets taken out, for a game. I could see that being the case here. I just wonder if there is some other sub context that we just don't know about. Is he not trusting in the organization in some way? Is the organization mishandling him when it comes to injuries and things like that? I don't know. It just does not go with any other type of situation that we have seen in the NFL in recent memory, at least that I can think of. I've never heard of a guy doing that. And this isn't us as old people saying, like, get out there and rub some dirt on it. It's more of a very confusing, you're 22 years old and you're tired. Like, what are some things that are factors that are going on that maybe aren't leading to your success in the NFL? And so I'll be fascinated to see how that goes because if the Colts don't have that, I mean, they can't start a 40-year-old Flacco forever. Like, this is a Band-Aid over a potentially large problem.
I'm trying to think how to condense this into a brief thing. So I think it could be one of two things. I coached a kid in football, star athlete. His junior season, like, was an all conference, led us to a state playoff berth, so on and so forth. And the next year, he sort of like did not seem as motivated, struggled, got a couple bumps and bruises, sort of took himself out, and communicated that he communicated intimately to the people close to him that basically he was no longer interested in playing the game of football and didn't like the pressure that was on him to perform. But publicly, it was, I want to play. The coaches are assholes, because he eventually got kicked off the team because he just like he completely fucked off to the point that it was like, you don't want to fall in line and just get out of here type of thing. And not just players on the team, the public lost their minds because you just kicked off this kid that's your best player, all these things. But like, that's what he wanted. Like at the end of the day, like he did not want to play because he didn't want that pressure and so on and so forth. It almost feels like maybe he's got this weird, I mean, maybe it's a mental health issue to the point where he doesn't want to be on the field. He doesn't want to be that guy, have the pressure of being a franchise quarterback. And it's a lot easier to tap out than it is to like admit that you just don't want to do it. And I mean, as weird, as bizarre as that sounds when you're talking about millions of dollars on the line, I think it wouldn't be the most shocking thing out of, this generation per se, not to sound like an old man, but like that but I mean, to just be like finding a way out. Right. And I'm not trying to even take shots at the guy. It could just be like a mental health thing where he's like, I just, I really don't want to be the guy that people have to count on all the time. Or
And
the
that
people,
and that's the thing is I just don't think we have enough information. Like
I
obviously a lot of
agree.
people are piling on this guy and it's like we really don't know. And I think we're looking at it, or pundits and media people are looking at it from that lens of you don't let your team down. And I don't disagree in many respects, but in terms of we just don't have enough information. And so it was all very bizarre. And that's why I said, I mean, Joe Flacco seems to be Tanya Harding now. Like he just gets guys hurt so he can continue to play. Like,
I'm not fine with them making the change to Joe Flacco at this point. And I think Joe Flacco could squeeze him into the playoffs, but that's all he's going to do.
yeah,
But Richardson wouldn't do any better at this point, I don't think. And so you might as well try to get another playoff berth out of the deal. Give Joe Flacco another few games to, I guess put another feather in his cap or whatever you want to call it. But I think that
sure.
and like Dave said here, he'll be back as soon as they're out of contention, and that's just it. It's like, okay, like, so you want, I mean, and I don't know if he means this as once they're out of contention, like he will he'll want to come back at that point,
No, I think they'll
you
throw him
know,
back in there.
you know. Well, and I guess if you are paying the guy what you're paying him, I heard someone say this about oh crap. Someone else, some other program or some other team in the NFL franchise. I can't remember who it was, but it's like you almost want to prove you were wrong. So the public doesn't think you were, it's okay for the public to think you were wrong once by drafting the wrong guy. They don't want to see that you were wrong once, moved off him too fast, and he went somewhere else and was really good.
Oh, you
You know
have
what I
to be
mean?
talking about Bryce Young.
And so it's more so you want to sit there and just play him to the point that he's so bad that like there's no doubt in anyone's mind that like he's not going to pan out, and then you ship him off to wherever else to be a career backup. And I didn't. Maybe that's the angle that the Colts are going to play, but it was a weird move. I think again, I credit him for his honesty. He wasn't. He didn't give us like the, you know, not coach speak, but he didn't talk around. He just said I was tired. Plain
Yeah.
and simple. And yeah, we'll see how things go. It's just not something you're used to hearing from a guy that's supposed to be a franchise quarterback.
No, it isn't. Something else you're not also used to seeing is Hail Marys to win the game the way that it happened in the Commanders Bears game. So the Commanders, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, as does Dave, and both of us have known for a long time that the Commanders, Redskins, whatever it was called at the time that you remember the franchise, has been nothing short of just awful, right? Nothing short of basically they can't do anything right. And to see them win a game the way that they won a game, seemingly have made the right draft pick, developed him with all of the tools that they've given him, everything looks right. And then the Bears draft Caleb Williams. They've had a few issues, but to lose the game the way that they did was horrific, but it doesn't happen too often. And it wasn't on Caleb Williams. I mean, of course, you can nitpick throughout the season, right? How you see, oh, he could have done this better, could have done that better. But like at the end of the game, I think that it's fair to say that not just because of that play, but throughout the season, I think the Chicago Bears have a major coaching problem. And they got rid of the whole staff except for Eberflus, which made zero sense to me. They should have just started over. And how do you defend what happened at the end of that game? It's madness to me when you watch it over and over again. It's like nothing about that went right.
You've seen Shameless.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm convinced that you could walk into South Chicago and in any living room and grab a Frank off the floor somewhere and take him up to Soldier Field, and he could do a better job than what Matt Eberflus has done. I mean, I saw a couple things thrown out today that he is like something like 2-13 against teams that are above 500. He's only won 3 games on the road against guys who aren't even playing quarterback in the NFL anymore this year. I mean, it's completely terrible. And I mean, there's a list of things you could point to in that game. The giving a lineman the ball down on the goal line after you got a running back that's having a day, man, and DeAndre Swift, and just having the culture where you have a guy that feels compelled to go celebrate while a play is happening and then run over and make it worse. You talk about compounding your mistake.
I know.
Celebrating, then running over and tipping the ball into the air, which
so
is
good.
Every high school player in America is taught to knock down a Hail Mary or the game-winning pass, whatever, in the end zone. You never tip it into the air. And you got a guy that's being paid millions of dollars to know what to do in the moment, and he does the complete opposite after making an ass of himself, trying to emote to the fans in the corner. It's just
this
such
is your new team now.
That's what I'm saying, man. I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll come back home to the local franchise and try to get on board with what they're doing on the ground floor. And that happened. I can't. And maybe Dave will welcome me on the Detroit Lions bandwagon. I have been there. I've been with the Lions here on the periphery for a couple seasons now.
It's very true.
And so maybe I can be officially accepted as a Lions fan. But my goodness, man, like I could not be a fan of a team that has. And again, I listened to some political football a few weeks ago when they were talking about how there's a pandemic, an epidemic, if you will, of stupid head coaches in the NFL, to put it bluntly. And I was like, at the time, I'm like, really? Like, you think these guys just really are that bad? I mean, they probably know more football than most people. But then I see things like this, and I'm like, Dave's right. These guys are morons.
I'll even
idiots.
give you another example is Gerard Mayo, not this past week, the week before against the Jags, or I don't know, was it against? I can't remember what it was. When it's like he opts to kick a field goal or opts not to go for it, or whatever. I'm sorry. He opts to go for 2 when they're down by 9 to make it a 7-point game, which losing, not getting the 2 point, you can't go for 9. Like 9 and 7 is a completely different score. It's a completely different scenario. So going for 2 in that scenario doesn't make sense. He's a first-year head coach, whatever, may not be a great head coach, but that's the kind of thing that you see all the time now in the NFL. And the coaches that consistently get it right are the ones that have been around for a long time and the ones that seem to get those little things about coaching. I don't see anything about Matt Eberflus that tells me that he is good at coaching. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I don't see things over the course of time where you're like, how is that guy still employed? Like Jason Garrett in Dallas, how the hell did he keep a job for 10 years? And it's crazy to me where a scenario like this, in a scenario that is practiced over and over and over again. And how do you not have the discipline? How does your team not have the discipline to do what you have to do and knock the damn ball down? That's all you had to do. Like, that's it. And I don't even know. I don't know.
I'm gonna say this right now, that as fans, we are all the fools, right? Because one of the most the drug in sports that causes the most damage is hopium. And hopium is what keeps these guys in business. And it's what keeps Jerry Jones in business, what keeps the Bears in business. It is the promise or the prospect of success. And it's what keeps people buying tickets and turning on the television. And as long as you have that belief, and these people are experts at making you believe that there's a chance, right? And I almost think it's easier to convince people there's a chance in these cities where they're so desperate to have a winner, right? And Chicago's one of those places right now. Cleveland's one of those places. Detroit was one of those places, and now they're really capitalizing on it. And credit to them, they are delivering for their fans. They're actually following through on what they've promised, if you will. And there's just so many places around the country where they're just stealing your money, and it's I I guess it's capitalism at its finest, but I think we all forget sometimes that this is a business, and you know, going what is it now? Going 10-7 could make you a lot of money. Going
Sure can.
9-8 could still make you a lot of money, and that's I think how a lot of these guys operate.
Yeah, they operate. That's all I got to say about that.
Right.
So listen, we're going to talk about parity. We're going to talk about the AFC East, NFC West being mid. However, before we came on here, you had an idea that you put in our notes, and I want you to list it because I believe you did list it in the notes. I did not put it here, but I want you to talk about, we're going to talk about the class and the ass of the NFL. Are you ready to go?
I guess I am as close to ready as possible.
All right.
While I'm scrambling to pull up
The notes that you wrote.
the notes that I wrote.
Exactly.
The other
And I
night.
think
Yep.
this is actually perfect because I think that you, who just watched the NFL for the first time this week, is the
Not the
perfect
first
person
time.
to
It's
do
not the
class and ass of the NFL. So let's start with the class because that's not nearly as intriguing.
I think we have 5 teams that fall in this category. I'm just going to rattle them off here: the Chiefs,
Okay.
the Lions, Bills, Texans, Packers. I think those teams are the class of the NFL at this moment.
And our friend Dave says the Lions bandwagon is going to be shut off after we do Green Bay by 21 in Lambeau this week. So I think we're going to possibly take the Packers out of the class of the NFL. But I'm going to make a statement. I know everybody's saying the Chiefs are undefeated. The Lions are the best team in the NFL, even without Aiden Hutchinson. I do believe that maybe over the course of time, Hutchinson's absence could be an issue, but that team is good. They are rolling. They're well coached, and I love it. I was a little nervous coming into the season that maybe there'd be a little bit of a hangover. You never know. You got the target. They are taking the target, and they are rolling with it, and I love it. And I do believe they're the best team in the NFL right now, and I will stand on that.
Damn it. That's it, Dave. I'm in. I'm going to get my ticket. I'm getting on the train, on the bandwagon, whatever you want to call it, throwing it all out. I'm all in on the Detroit Lions right now. I'm here, man. I'm fully in. Move over, make some room for me. I'm on the bandwagon. MCDC, Man Campbell, whatever you want to call the man. He's number one in my book. Number one in your hearts. Number one wherever. Give me MCDC and the Lions. I'm on the bandwagon.
All right, I like it. So, how about the ass of the NFL?
The ass of the NFL, and it's so interesting that
if the Patriots aren't on this list, I'm going to be upset.
Well, it's funny because they're not.
That's sad.
Giants, Jets, so New York,
Yes.
collectively, the Panthers, the Titans, who have started like 3 different quarterbacks, I think.
Good God.
3 or 4. The Browns, granted, they got the nice win, but I mean, with the way things are trending, it's sort of like you put the Browns on after a win, you don't put the Patriots on after, which they would have been had they not won, whatever. You trade Patriots, Browns, if you will. And I think the Raiders kind of ass a little bit.
Not kind of. The Raiders are ass for sure.
So I think that that's kind of what I feel. And if you want to look at another interesting conversation would be like teams that you would expect to be class that aren't, like the 49ers. Would you ever expect that one player makes that much of a difference?
Well, it's not
the
player
quarterback.
anymore.
It's not the quarterback, though.
It's not one anymore. I mean, Ayuk's out, and obviously
But
McCaffrey
they were
is out.
struggling before him, though. I mean, like, Christian
Yes.
McCaffrey, like apparently he makes that much of a difference. And I mean, I think is he coming back? It sounds like he may be.
I don't
I'm
know.
stashing him. Okay, like just tune out for a minute. Most of you don't care. Stashing him on the bench of my fantasy team in an attempt to be a problem in the playoffs. Okay, if he returns, like
Problem.
that's my only intention.
If I make it, yes, very good. That's the one thing that nobody cares about, as we talked about your
Exactly.
fantasy team. And in March, we'll talk about our brackets. So we're right in line. 49ers, though, I feel like it's either one of two things. Either the injuries obviously are catching up to them, and Brock Purdy is not able to overcome those injuries with his talent level, because that's possible, or it's that their window is closing. And that could possibly be the reason as well. But I saw some memes this week that talked about how this is the time of year where everybody wants to fire Kyle Shanahan. And then in late November, when they've rattled off like 4 wins in a row, everybody's like, okay, great. And they're going to convince themselves that they're going to win the Super Bowl only to lose to the Chiefs yet again. So it's one of those cycles for the 49ers that seems to happen. But there are a lot of mid teams right now that I feel like we're not sure yet, because I still don't feel like I know a ton. Like, I think when you said the class and the ass of the NFL, I think you're pretty spot on with most of them. I do have a stat of the week. I'm not going to play the music because it is something that you have already talked about. Dave actually shared it with us as well. But Notre Dame has scored more touchdowns at MetLife Stadium in one game than the Jets and Giants have all year long. And that's pretty sad. But I do have a question about the Giants. I was thinking about this because I'm watching the Giants and I'm thinking, like, they do have, I mean, Malik Neighbors is great. He's going to be a talent for sure. Got robbed of a touchdown by just having a foot out of bounds. But I can't tell, is Dave Ball a bad coach or not?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think their issue is more at the GM level. I feel like I think letting Saquon walk was a mistake. Um, I think that drafting Daniel Jones was a mistake.
At whatever he was, 5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think Dable's just playing the hand he was dealt.
Yeah. And I can't tell that, right? Because at times they look competent, but I know that they're not competent. Whereas on the other side of New York, you have the Jets, who, this is so, like, I feel so bad for Cleve, but I feel great for us because it's content and we get to talk about it. But this season couldn't be going any worse. You would almost argue that last season was better because he was out from 4 snaps and they knew the season was over. Now he's playing, he's washed. The team just is, I don't even know. They can't beat the Patriots. I mean, that's sad, especially when they knocked out Drake May and you get Brissett back in. And you know what you're getting with Brissett. How the hell did Jacoby Brissett make a comeback in that game? It was insane.
It was absolutely insane. I have no idea, but
Because you had him in DraftKings.
He's one of the great backups in the NFL.
Oh my God. But like, watching him play football this season has been legitimately painful for me. Like, it's awful. 130 yards on 15 to 32. Like, I can't watch that. I just cannot watch that. And the Jets lose to that. And it's like, the Jets are bad. And you know who else might actually be ass? The Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
I mean,
yes. Again, I agree completely. And Jerry Jones goes out publicly and like, we paid guys. No, you paid 2 guys. You paid 2 guys.
they didn't. Yes, and stop
That's
it,
it.
because they were already on the team. So like, they didn't do anything. So this is my theory on the Cowboys, and I was talking with Mike about this because I like to joke about the whole all-in thing, and Mike gets a little sensitive about it. But I was like, here's the thing about all-in: it's how it was sold. If Jerry Jones knew monetarily that he wasn't going to be able to go all in free agency, he should have said that, right? He should have said, we're all in. We are every year, but we're going to do what we can with the
His
resources
ego
that
won't
we have.
allow it.
I know. But when you say, I'm all in, and you're bringing back McCarthy, who has been mid, even though the record would say otherwise, they've been mid when they've had to be great and they've not been able to win. That's a reflection on the coach. And I feel like to sell it that way gives the fans and the media this perception that they're all in. They do nothing in free agency. Yes, they signed Dak, they signed CD to the big extensions. That's great. But that's it. Their running backs are Dalvin Cook, or is it Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott? It's like, those guys are washed. They've been washed for years. And so
Zeke looks like he's like 6 months pregnant.
I mean, he always kind of has, but notice how he stopped doing the eating thing whenever he gets a big run because
I
it goes,
know, man.
so it's just the Cowboys, I think, might be ass. And that kind of gets us into some of these games. So the Cowboys play 49ers, and the game wasn't as close as the score would indicate. And now they have to travel to the Falcons. And Kirk Cousins has that team looking okay. I mean, this is a game where it's like, wow, all of a sudden the Cowboys could be almost out of it in their division. And they really, really need this win. I'm not sure that they have it, man. Like, it's almost better for the Cowboys to lose from here on out.
No, they won't. They'll find a way to win some games and keep people engaged and interested, and because that's what they do, man. Seriously.
I know. I actually was like, if they beat the 49ers, they're going to trick Mike into thinking that they're actually good when the Dallas Cowboys are not good. So that'll be an interesting one. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the 5-3 Denver Broncos, Bo Nix actually might look okay. Like, I don't even know how that's possible. And they're traveling to the Ravens, who are also 5-3, and that's wild.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta kind of give the Broncos a little bit of credit for what they've been able to do, right? And
Yes, I will give them credit.
the Ravens have been very on par with, I feel like, what they normally are. I think that
Up and down.
they're kind of up and down. They lose some games they shouldn't lose, but they get it together come playoff time, and then lose, in the divisional round.
Yes, and that's exactly right. Oh man, you're good at this. You're good at predicting this. But the thing is, I wonder if Bo Nix will get figured out next year. Like, he's looking pretty good. They're scheming him up really well. Once you get that year of tape on a guy, you kind of see how it goes. But that could be an interesting game. The Broncos get a big win against the Ravens, and it's like, wow, could the Broncos actually be playoff contenders? We'll see. Your beloved Bears traveling to Arizona to face the Cardinals, who are the
Pass.
first place Cardinals. And Marv looks pretty good. Whenever they get him the ball, he looks pretty good.
Love Marv. Pass.
All right, pass. And your game, Lions at Packers. So obviously, we all know the
Lions
are
by
gonna
a
win
million.
Yep, Lions by a million. Packers, Jordan Love seems to have found something.
He
Yeah.
looks really good. Yeah, he does.
He looks very comfortable in the pocket to me.
Yes.
Like, that's something that I noticed recently. I was like, wow. Like, certain quarterbacks just look very comfortable in the pocket. Even at the pro level, some guys get a little antsy back there. They get a little jittery. And the guys I've noticed, like Zach Wilson, never looked comfortable in the pocket. Jordan Love looks like he's good. Like, he's okay with getting hit. He knows how it's going to go. And even kind of Purdy looks that way to an extent, because you get some time in the pocket, you get some snaps, start to put things together.
Well, it has more to do with the offensive line. I think,
does.
And them
Sure.
trusting the offensive line.
Sure, but also there are times where you're going to have pressure, and the guys that can stand in there and make that throw, it is what it is. Rams at Seahawks. The reason that's interesting is because the NFC West is kind of so mid that every team is in it, and McVay has some guys back. They got Cooper Kupp back, they got Puka Nacua back, and they beat the Vikings, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but every team that has played the Lions this year has lost the week after.
Really? That's crazy.
Yes.
Well, and DK Metcalf was out last week, I think, for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
He's back this week.
Yep.
So I think
could be good.
it'll be a classic NFC West slobberknocker.
Yep. Colts at Vikings. The reason I say that is because now we got Joe Flacco. When I made these notes, it was not Joe Flacco. But how did the Vikings respond after 2 straight wins? Is Darnold coming back down to the mean? The defense has been really good. Brian Flores has those guys really flying around, so that'll be interesting. And, of course, the Chiefs are going to eke out another win probably against Baker and the Bucks as they host the Bucks, I believe, on
Give me Baker
Sunday
and the
night or Monday
boys.
night. Baker and I know. I love watching them. They look good in the creamsicles this weekend, so you never know. But the Chiefs just seem to be, I don't know. The Chiefs seem to be able to. It's crazy to me how the Chiefs keep winning football games when it seems like they have nothing, but they obviously got.
The funny part was on Sunday I go, oh yes, the Bucks are wearing the creamsicles. My dad goes, I don't know. I think those look like throwbacks.
They are. Thank you, Rick. They are. That is terrific.
I was like,
is,
yes.
Yeah, since there's a reason why Rick is not prognosticating anything. And Coach, speaking of prognosticating, it's been a minute, but Coach's pick of the week. So unfortunately, the streak is over. long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, you had picked Arizona over BYU. That did not come to fruition. I believe BYU won by like 58 points. So you are now 7-1 on the season. But you know what? Every day is a new day. And so you have a chance to redeem yourself. So please bless us with a picketh of the week.
Hear ye, hear ye. Never underestimate the power of the Church of Latter-day Saints as the BYU Cougars get it done over the Arizona Wildcats several weeks ago at this point in time. But do not despair, as I bestow upon you knowledge that is certain to lead to great wealth and power. I
Preach.
ask you, peasants, to please come as I give you the pick of the week. Earlier in the show, we spoke at length about the parity atop the Atlantic Coast Conference. And there is a game that's happening between two teams that are near the top of that league. And I think that it's going to be critical in how the season finishes and who wins this conference. The Duke Blue Devils are taking on the Miami Hurricanes. As we mentioned earlier, the Miami Hurricanes are 21-point favorites in this game over the 6-2 Duke Blue Devils. Coach here, pick of the week, right? As you all know, I am taking the Duke Blue Devils plus 21 to cover the spread against the Miami Hurricanes. Since they play everyone close, why not play Duke close? I'm on the Devils.
So you have the Duke Blue Devils to cover, but not win outright over the Miami Hurricanes. So we'll see how that goes for you. Miami has looked pretty good, but they haven't been able to really beat teams that solid by that many points. So let it be written, Coach. So let it be done. All right, man. That is the end of the episode as we wrap up this great, great week of football analysis. So it's been fun to get back in here. We had a few technical difficulties a little bit earlier, but I think we brought it all together and made for a good program. So do you have anything you'd like to tell our loyal listener?
Just thank you as always for listening. We had some good interaction here. We had quite a few viewers roll through, so I appreciate that. I think that we're now at that time of the season where week after week we are going to be honing in closer and closer to what the playoffs look like in both college football and the NFL, and really get an idea of who's who. And we're going to start to have some of these high leverage elimination game type matchups, which make for exciting content and a lot of fun conversations here. So thanks for participating and coming and listening. And I hope to see you all next week.
Hopefully you will see us next week. I also want to thank everybody. You can find us on social media, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. If you're listening in audio, please remember to subscribe, Apple, Spotify, give us some ratings, give us some stars. It means a lot, and it at least shows people that we know what we're doing, like maybe 30% of the time. So hope this finds everybody well. Hope this finds everybody safe, and we'll see you next time. This is Football Frenzy.